Today I'd like to talk about warm season food plots. One of the more common questions we get about warm season food plots is why would we want to plant one? And that's a fair question. You're not hunting that time of year. You end up planting twice a year and all those things, but there are many advantages to planting a warm season food plot. Warm season food plots do several things. A, you've got attractive forage instead of a bunch of weeds in your food plot. It conditions deer to feeding in that area year-round. They do not associate that area with danger. Another reason is if you don't maintain that, that cool season food plot, it goes into the summer and it seeds out, weeds are going to take over that area, and you're going to have to probably use a herbicide to get it ready for that cool season food plot the following late summer, early fall. But if you have a really good warm season food plot established, it should choke out or keep almost all the weeds at bay. A big reason that's really come to light for me in the last several years is by planting a diverse blend during the warm season, I'm improving the soil. It reduces or eliminates the need for me to use fertilizer during that fall season. And my seed costs may turn out to be less than the fertilizer cost if I'm doing it right. So we're conditioning the soil by having a good diverse species blend growing in the warm season. We're suppressing weeds or reducing the need to use herbicide, and we're keeping deer tuned in to feeding in that area. If you're a deer manager, you want to make sure there's quality food sources where you hunt during the growing season, because that's when does are either in the last trimester of carrying that fawn or producing milk for the fawn, depending on the spring or summer portion of the year you're talking about, and bucks are producing antlers. And we all know that the better quality nutrition in an area, bucks of the same age class will have larger antlers. If you take a buck, from a coastal barrier island where there's nothing but a few pine trees or something like that growing, they don't produce very large bodies or antlers. And you take a buck out of Iowa where there's really high quality forage all summer long, those bucks have much larger bodies and much larger antlers. If you decide to plant a warm season food plot, I mentioned earlier that we want certain conditions, and those conditions for almost all varieties of warm season forage is about 60 degrees in the soil at 2 inches deep at 9 a.m. The reason that's so specific is the earth cools all night long. It's losing heat, and the sun needs to get, up over the horizon enough to generate enough heat for that soil to stabilize and start warming up. Now, you don't have to run out in the field and stick a thermometer in the soil 2 inches deep. There are plenty of websites that show the soil temperature, and I found those to be accurate enough for planting. It may not be to the exact degree where you are, but it will be within a close range. I'll share a caution based on a lot of experience. You don't want to plant as soon as you see it 60 degrees or 58 degrees and it's snowing out in Colorado. You want to look at the forecast, west of you, our weather basically goes west to east, more or less. And if there's a strong cold front coming, that soil temperature can drop quickly, just like fishermen know that water temperatures can drop quickly right before the spawn. I'm also want to consider soil moisture. Even if that soil temperature gets warm enough and there's no rain at the forecast and it's been dry for 3 weeks, don't plant. It's important to remember that seeds are living organisms and they're dormant when they're in the seed bag. Hopefully they're stored appropriately. And you put them in the ground, they get a bit warmer and maybe just a bit of moisture, they're going to germinate, they're going to sprout and go. But if it's really dry, they will germinate and then they will die of desiccation. They don't have enough moisture for those cells to continue growing. So you want to make sure there's either ample soil moisture, and what I like even more is a good chance of rain coming right after I plant. And when I say rain, I'm talking a ½ inch or more, something that's going to put some moisture in the soil, not just a shower. Let's take that one step further. My preferred way to plant is using a no-till drill. I can just make a little slice into the soil, put the seed down there where there may be some moisture and cover it back up. You could disc, throw some seed out and disc again, but remember, farmers disc if necessary to dry out a field. When you disc, you expose that moisture to the atmosphere and it wants to evaporate off. And also disking collapses all the pore structure, which is really important for future soil. We want our water infiltrating into the soil, but if you collapse all those pores, make it like concrete, it hits the ground and runs off of it. My friend Keith Burns learned this from another farmer. It's not how much rain we get, it's how much we keep. So a ½ inch of rain that soaks into the soil through those soil pores is way more valuable to the crop than an inch of rain that runs off and very little soaks in.
Growing Deer is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Also by Green Cover Food Plots, Winchester, PH Outdoors, Moultrie Mobile, Steel, Fleet Outdoor Apparel, Morel Targets, Fourth Arrow, Scorpion Venom Archery, Case IH Tractors, Ward Laboratories, Burris Optics, G5 Broadheads, Prime Bows, and Redneck Hunting Blinds.
As I mentioned earlier, when to plant in the spring is based on weather and soil conditions, temperature, moisture, stuff like that. What to plant and how long that crop is going to last is more based on your latitude. There's a difference between South Florida and North Michigan. If you're planting in South Florida and you plant as soon as those soil conditions get right, way South Florida, maybe even in February, there's a lot of growing days before it goes into a fall type season. But if you're in northern Michigan or northern New York, you may not plant till really late May or early June, and that first frost could happen in late August or early September. You want to plant the appropriate blend for your area, and I'll just take soybeans as an example. Now that's a monoculture, not a blend, but soybeans are sowed in maturity groups, 0, group 1, group 2, group 3. And basically, between a group 1 and a group 2 maturity means 10 more days to mature. So if you're way far north, you would not want to plant a group 6 or 7 bean. There's no chance it's going to make flowers or seed pods before the first frost. So plant accordingly based on where you are. In the middle part of the country, northern Alabama, Iowa, there's a lot of overlap in there, but at the extremes, you need to be careful or at least make a good selection on what you plant. For most of us, kind of in the middle of the latitudes, I really like a blend. No single species can be, drought tolerant and browse tolerant and handle wet feet if it rains a lot and handle real cold weather if we get a cold snap. But you can plant a blend and have a species in there that's really drought tolerant, maybe like Milo, something that matures quicker like buckwheat, something that can really express its potential if it's great growing season like some peas or maybe even some beans. You put all these different species together, that's as close as we can come to creating that mythical magic bean. Inexpensive, deer love it, but they don't overbrowse it. It's drought tolerant, it's cold tolerant, it can take heat. There is no one plant, but we get close to that when we plant the blend, and whatever the conditions are best for it, that species or species really thrive, choke out weeds until the conditions change for the other species to thrive. For several years now, I've been planting blends from Green Cover Seed. I really like them because they're an agricultural company that I actually talked in to making some blends for us food plotters or wildlife guys. They buy such huge quantities of seed. It's always fresh, and you'll notice there's never a big buck on the bag. They're not jacking the price up just because it's going to a hunter. They stock about 150 different varieties or species of seed, and allows me to help them create really good blends for food plots. During the past 3 decades, I've really worked on refining how I plant, when I plant, what I plant from a food plot point of view. And that's kind of all developed over time in something we call the release process, which is basically releasing the earth or creation's potential. I haven't purchased any fertilizer in almost 10 years now, except for some test strips or something like that. And I haven't used my sprayer in a couple of years. Now, I may need to use it sometime again, but I'm getting on top of all the weeds, and I've got the soil working for me instead of me adding synthetic fertilizer to it. So stay tuned, and we'll be going through in detail the steps of the release process as we get closer to or even in to the spring planting season. But don't fear, I still plant my high-to food plots and small hard reach areas by hand, and we'll be sharing those techniques also. watching stuff grow, you know, go from a dormant seed back to life again, I think is a really perfect illustration of the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. It's extremely important for all of us to be quiet each day, really focus on the Creator and His will for our life. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.